Good morning, everybody. One of the big themes of history after World War II was the end of colonial empires. The British in India, the Dutch in Indonesia, etc. And it was on this date in 1954, October 11, that the French finished their withdrawal from their colony of Indochina, which we know as Vietnam. This map of Asia around 1900 reminds us that the European powers had colonies there, and the French had Indochina, Laos, Cambodia, and Vietnam. And here's a legacy of that. This is the Opera House in Hanoi in Vietnam today. So the French left an impact on that part of the world. And when the great powers met at Versailles after World War I, one of the themes was self-determination for all people. So what about the colonial areas? Did they get independence? And this was a big question that came out of World War I. So Ho Chi Minh, pictured here, was in France. The story is that he tried to get a meeting with Woodrow Wilson to talk about the independence of Vietnam. Didn't happen, and he soon became associated with independence movements in Vietnam. When World War II came, Japan conquered Vietnam as well as other parts of East Asia. And this was a big thing for the Vietnamese, of course, to be occupied by Japan. And when France fell to the Germans in 1940, the early days of World War II, this was noticed by the Vietnamese people because the French were their colonizers. So during World War II, we helped the Vietnamese fight the Japanese. That's Ho Chi Minh, kind of on the left in the shorts. He's with some guys from the OSS, and here you can see Americans saluting the Vietnamese flag as well as the American flag. So when World War II was over, it looked like Vietnam would become independent. So here's a picture of Japanese soldiers laying down their arms to the British. Then, of course, the British withdrew, and Ho actually wrote a letter to Harry Truman having to do with would the United States support Vietnam in independence. But Truman never replied. Not quite sure if he even read it. But soon after the war ended, the French came back into Vietnam. Here you can see French Marines waiting ashore. This was not popular in France, partly because the French economy was bankrupt, and I think the French were pretty well sick of war by then. But war started again in what was called Indochina, and you can see that the purple, which the French have, is smaller than the orange, which the Viet Minh have. These were the guerrillas and things. And the set-piece battle happened in Dien Bien Phu, way up in North Vietnam. The French had a fort here, but it was only supplied by air. There wasn't really a road there. And the Vietnamese surrounded them, and because everything had to be supplied by air, not only men but material, it was not easy, but the Vietnamese were able to defeat the French, and the French surrendered. So in 1954, there was a conference in Geneva. The idea was Vietnam would be split in half. Eventually, there would be free elections. And on this date, October 11, 1954, the French ended their withdrawal from Vietnam. Now, this is Dien Bien Phu today in North Vietnam, site of the big battle where the French surrendered after this long siege. And if you know this movie, Go Tell the Spartans from 1978, the plot is Americans are in Vietnam, but near them is a French cemetery of French soldiers who had died in Vietnam, and they're kind of haunted by that. And in Apocalypse Now, from 1979, there's a scene where they meet French settlers who are still in Vietnam, even though the French are long gone. So there's another reminder of the French in Vietnam. And if you ever get out to the Champagne region of France, you'll find this monument in Epernay to French soldiers who died in Vietnam. Not a happy time for the French.